almost feels as if what the devil is doing, shouldn't we be focused more on what God is doing? You know, let's build a case. Why is it necessary? Are these even issues with us? So I'll quickly look at LGBTQ particularly and postmodernism, because my whole argument is going to be theological literacy and education is really, really crucial. So let me just paint a picture of where we are with those two, LGBTQ and postmodernism, and then circle back and talk about what our response, in my view, ought to be. This is a picture of the first ladies of Europe. It was taken in 2016, I believe. Trump was president. I'm sure you remember those glorious days, quote unquote. So Mrs. Trump should be somewhere here. I think they'd visited Europe, and a photo was taken of the first ladies of Europe. And yes, you did not miss anything. That's not, there's a guy in that picture, right? That's not a bodyguard of one of the first ladies. That's actually a first lady. Yeah. He is a she. Well, he considered himself a she because he is married. He was married then to one of the prime ministers of Europe. So he was the first spouse. I don't know if they're still called ladies, but first lady's photo, smack in the middle is a man, and it's normal. This I actually picked from one of the newspapers, and it had nothing to do with the story that it was not a sexuality or homosexuality story. It was just a normal story, and in it is a photo of first ladies of Europe, and voila, that's it. I mean, I looked at this and paused for a bit and thought, this is actually how far we've come. Like, these issues have been so normalized to a point that among first ladies, a photo op of first ladies, you'll have men standing there, and it's okay. Nobody actually talks about it. In the last couple of years, we've had the Prime Minister of Iceland being lesbian, the Prime Minister of Belgium being homosexual, gay, the Prime Minister of Luxembourg being gay, the Prime Minister of Ireland being gay, the Prime Minister of Serbia being lesbian, and guess what? This is not a conclusive list. Do you know who funds most of the development projects we have in this country today? Ninani? It's these guys. It's the European Union, right? The European Union, which is led by these guys. And of course, they have an agenda that they are actively promoting. And often, that agenda will be tied to the aid. You know? And so, unfortunately, for many of our countries now, the LGBTQ agenda is pretty huge, and there's a lot of stuff that is actually happening on the ground that should cause all believers to be concerned. And so, as being salt and light in our society, as being the shepherds of the flock, it's important that you know how to respond biblically and just know how to engage. I have just been speaking to young people who are at a camp. I don't think there's a problem to mention the church, because I'm sure this happens in all our churches. These were young people from Sitam, Woodley. Woodley, Sitam, lots of young people gathered at their center in Kiserian. And so I was speaking to them about, turns out, sexuality. And they had requested me to speak on this topic. And so I did my presentation, and we had time for question and answer. And you know what the most predominant question was? Was what is wrong? What really is wrong with this issue? See, love is love. It comes in all shapes, forms, and sizes. Yeah? And you would think that this is a small minority, but I tell you the truth, in your houses and my houses are young people who are being conditioned continually to think that way. By television, by the internet, by schools. Yeah? Some of these course books they are reading are actually supported and pushed by some of these gay advocacy groups. Good example. A few years back, do we have any teachers in the house? Teachers professionally? There was a set book called The Well Rider. Remember Whale Rider a couple of years ago? Whale Rider was being pushed by, especially some of these guys who are funding, the European Union, which are funding our education. And it was written by a New Zealand gay activist, okay? He's professionally, he does literature and stuff, he's really good. The book is awesome. But when you know where the guy is coming from, and with those lenses you begin to read the book, I love literature, by the way, like totally. So I'm a literature bluff. You go through the book and you cannot miss those nuances. There are ideas that are being pushed down the throats or the minds of our young people. Okay? You've heard of the Comprehensive Sex Education, Csc. Again, it's being advanced and pushed to us by these donor agencies. And you know some of the things that are taught in there, Csc? Anyone interacted with the ideas therein? Yes, there's someone at least at the back. Ideas like masturbation are actually normalized. Like this is legitimate ways of expressing yourself. And do you know who this is taught to? Csc is meant to begin in kindergarten. Like kindergarten kids being taught how to express their sexuality. That includes masturbation. Definition of family includes different types of families. You have man and women, husband and wife, my two mothers, my two fathers. Those are different types of families. And these are the ideas that are being pushed to our kids. We are essentially losing a generation on account of these subtle ideologies that are being passed. So how do we engage? That question is important. Parents will come to our churches for guidance. Children that we are talking about come every Sunday to the congregations to hear from you. So direction will be needed. How then do we respond? That is why we need to have this conversation today. These have been the typical responses, particularly to the LGBTQ issue. And by the way, I'm not going to belabor the LGBTQ because it's just one aspect of a much bigger problem. So I'll move on shortly. But these are typical responses by governments, by individuals, by churches, society in general. I've put them in P's so you can remember them. The first one is permit. So many countries in Europe, in the United States, especially during the Obama era, they officially allowed, homosexual unions, and they were recognized. So there's permitting. Number two is promoting and perpetuating. And this is interesting because permission is probably subtle. It's not active. It is, you do your thing. It's okay. We know it's legal, but we are not doing anything about it. Promoting and perpetuating takes it to the next level, which is we are actively challenging status quo and ensuring that this habit is promoted. And how do you do it? We'll attach it to aid. When our presidents will visit your countries, we will use that forum and publicity to raise awareness on the issue. And unfortunately, that is where Europe particularly and most of the Western governments is doing. They're not just permitting, but they're promoting and perpetuating actively around the world, including and especially in the global south, our countries, Africa especially. And then there are places that it is prohibited. There are places where there's prosecution. So for example, Kenya is here. It's prohibited. There's meant to be prosecution, but we don't quite prosecute as such, right? And then there's places where it's actually persecuted. The gays are actually persecuted, especially in the Middle East and all. But the interesting bit is the places where persecution happens are actually the places that have the greatest amounts, the greatest concentration of people who engage in this act. It's fascinating. A couple of years ago, a magazine called Mother Jones, which is a social commentary magazine, they look at social issues and do research and all. They did a research on the access to gay pornography. Countries in the world that access gay pornography the most. Okay? Do you know which country was number one in the whole world? Gay pornography. Number one was Pakistan. In Pakistan, this is what happens. This is how the government responds. Okay? Number two Uganda. Now, you know Museveni's stance on this matter, right? Number 3, ladies and gentlemen, yours truly, the 254. Kenya was number 3 in the world in use and access of these gay pornographic sites. So are these issues relevant? Kwani, who do you think is accessing these sites? It's non-believers out there. It is the guys who sit under you every Sunday. That is the truth. You know? You should have seen. So at some point I had the students there just write questions on slips of paper, and any who need personal help to indicate that, they did. And there are issues. There are issues we must address. I think I belabor the point here. The point is, we need to talk about these things and know how to respond. Yes?
Just before you go on,
yes.
Some of us like me,
yes.
stuck at LG.
Okay. Oh, okay. Thank you. L is lesbians. G is? B is? T is? Q is? Or questioning. And then plus. Because there are now many others. Do you know in the United States today there are more than 100 genders that are, yeah, like 100. I'm not joking. And yes, they are as weird as it comes. Molly genders. I mean, it is completely strange. I'll not get into those details. You can go search for yourself. But we really are losing an entire generation. And even just the logical way of coming up with this is quite disturbing, because it's usually informed by what people sense, yeah? What people feel. So if I feel like I'm a woman trapped in a man's body, then I will want to identify as lesbian. If I feel like a man trapped in a woman's body, I will want to identify as gays. And it's gotten so weird in the United States and most of these Western countries that if you do not reference to people the way they would want to be identified, you can actually get sued. Okay? So, for example, you've seen those cases of a Christian baker refuses to bake cakes for a gay couple, and the guy is taken to jail. He's sued. And they're saying, no, my faith does not allow me, I don't recognize this. But you have an obligation to provide the service, because the state now recognizes this union. Okay? So that is discrimination. So it's getting really, really strange. There's a professor from Canada who actually identifies, he was a PhD candidate, so he should be a doctor now. He actually identifies as a female hippopotamus. That's how he identifies. This guy is not mad. But the way he feels deep down inside, he feels like a female hippopotamus. And he probably has a pronoun for that. So if you don't identify him as such, you can actually get sued. It's getting ridiculous, guys. Look at the Olympics now. In this past Olympics in Japan, we had more than 100 athletes who are from this community. And especially the transgender numbers are shooting through the roof. You know why? The quickest way to get an Olympic medal now is to identify as a transgender. You know why? There's this New Zealand weightlifter, for example, who, was a champion in New Zealand, had been lifting weights as a man. But competition is really stiff out here. We don't know his motivations. We can't question. But dude realizes that he's a woman trapped in a man's body. So he undergoes the operation, and now he's a woman. And because culture accepts women of this kind, now he moves from the women weightlifting to the females, from the men's weightlifting to the female weightlifters, and of course he's beating every other woman. And we allow that to pass. But thankfully, even the woke culture and the global left is now beginning to catch up, because they are now asking these questions. They're saying, is it fair? Is it fair? But if you are asking whether it's fair, you essentially are questioning whether this person is truly a woman now that he is identifying as a woman. It is getting ridiculous. We can't even compete anymore. So, Culture is losing it. The wheels of the bus are spinning out of control. They are chucking from the bus. It's important for us to have this conversation and be clear on how we ought to respond. I thought this image is very fascinating here, and I wanted to just bring us to speed. This is European countries. Eastern Europe, Western Europe. This is Africa, and these are the typical responses for homosexuality in Africa and in Europe. Forget about Europe. Eastern Europe is still quite, here is where you have Russia and all. They're still quite conservative. But look at Africa. The green is where there's no punishment for homosexuality. Okay? Now, take a look. The orange is where 1 month to 2 years, but there are conversations that are pushing towards liberalization and allowing for, the practice, recognition of homosexual unions, etc. Look at how the greens are eating the reds. Okay, so South Africa, you have Namibia here, you have Zimbabwe, this is Mozambique, you have Zimbabwe here going orange, you have the DRC here, no issues, you have, this is Central African Republic, right? Or Chad, I think. Yeah, Chad, green, Central African Republic, Mali, you have, this should be Cote d'Ivoire, Basically, the Guineas here, basically, the greens are eating away at the red, right? In Kenya, you notice the color is changing because the gay rights movement has really been fighting. And recently, I think in 2021, there was a major ruling that threw out a petition to recognize homosexual unions, but it was thrown out, the judges were just clever, on account of a technicality, not on the merits of the argument, because they knew probably when they go there with some of the other things that our liberal constitution is increasingly allowing, it would be difficult. So I think they just played a clever game. So technicality, it got knocked out. So what if those guys go and rearrange and sort out the technical issues? Chances are, we are also going green, okay? My point is this. This is a pertinent issue. You cannot push it under the carpet. We need to talk about it. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention to us quickly is postmodernism. So that was homosexuality, LGBTQ. I hope you now believe this is important for us to talk about here. Let's talk about postmodernism. It's a big word. What does it really mean? So I thought to just do this schematic that kind of paints the picture and helps us appreciate what we're talking about. There was a time when we had a God-centered universe, where during the pre-modern times, people generally believed that God exists, okay? So I think it's C.S. Lewis who calls it the sense of the numinous. There was this general idea that God exists. Your grandparents, your ancestors talked about the God of Mount Kenya, they prayed facing whatever. There was that general idea in most cultures around the world that there's a God. The question is the definition of that God and the attributes and all, but there was an idea that God exists. And so truth is defined by God. And since God is absolute, then this truth is absolute. It can be, that truth is true everywhere, in other words. That was during the pre-modern times. But the pre-modern times were overtaken by the modern times, modernism, where now science began to take preeminence. Science began to grow. Men discovered instruments that helped us to study the heavens, and we began realizing, there was this idea of heliocentrism, which says the earth is the center of the world. Now we realized with Galileo's discoveries and all that, no, we are not the center of the world. There's actually the sun, which is the center of not even the world, just our solar system. The universe is so big. So science began to grow. This guy who did evolution, Charles Darwin and all. So because of this, people began to question religion and this whole idea of God. So those were the modern times. So now we began to realize that maybe truth is not just what God defines. There are other avenues of truth. So truth, in other words, is relative. Okay? It depends. Science might have its truth. You might have your truth. Different cultures have different truths. So those were the modern times. But we've moved from the modern times to the postmodern times. Now, the postmodern times are the era we are living in, but we are slowly getting out of the postmodern into what I'm calling metamodernism. But in the postmodernism era, we basically are having now skepticism being celebrated, where we are saying not just that truth is relative, that anyone can determine what is true to them. So if what is true to you is I'm feeling like I'm a female hippopotamus, then that's my truth. I'm just living my truth. And you've heard, especially in popular media, people saying, live your truth. Sindio? Me, I'm just living out my truth. So if my truth is I'm gay, then I'm gay. I'm the one who determines what is true. You've heard, anyone listens to Nyashinsky here? Nyashinsky, anyone? I'm a sisi wa Kristo, I'm a pastor, we don't. So Nyashinsky and others sing songs like Hapo tu, hatukujudge. And the whole song is basically saying, hatukujudge kwa sababu, wewe ndio unadetermine what is true. Truth is your creation. You create truth. Okay, so we move to a place where truth is created. I create my own truth. I create my own reality. Okay? And I can live in that reality as long as I want. And in whichever way I want. And it's really ridiculous. So now in Europe and some of these Western countries, you have all these ideas of, for example, there are nude beaches, places where you can just walk naked. And it's okay, men and women combine, mtatembea tu. Like, really? Because that is our truth. Our truth is, hizi nguo tunavaa zinatu-inhibit, na sisi ni wanyama. Tunataka kuwa wanyama. So let us be animals. And that is the truth, unfortunately, that now we are living out. So, truth is created. Okay? Because people got disillusioned with all this idea of, especially the absoluteness of truth, which is what the church still holds to. But now we are moving to a place where we are calling metamodernism. Facebook recently changed its name to Meta, okay? And it really is an extrapolation of this idea. It's an expansion of this same idea. Where now we are saying it's not just truth that is multiple. Entire realities can be created virtually. So I can live in Miami without moving from my seat in Kirigiti. Okay? I can go for a date with someone in New Zealand. There was recently some news item about virtual strip clubs that our children are having access to. Someone, you saw that? Yes. Sorry? Right? It's an app or a game, right? It's a game. It's a gaming app. So, kids, your children, many of us tunawapatianga hizo masimu, sindio? Those are some of the places they visit. Virtual strip club. You'll go there, you'll party, you'll strip girls, you'll do things to each other. Virtual sex is happening. It's crazy. Virtual realities, okay? So metamodernism, where the algorithms and the computers now know you better than you know yourself. You know why? Because these computers now, every day Facebook asks you, what's on your mind? And you know what you do? You tell Facebook what's on your mind. And Facebook and all these other sites begin to profile you. So over a period of time, they know exactly who you are. You might be here. We think you're a pastor, mighty man of God. Kumbe, behind closed doors, you patronize those pornographic sites. Huko, maybe you even have an avatar. Unajulikana huko. Yeah? Baba yao. And you see, we will not know. We will not know. You don't have to put your face. You can put the face of a rhino as your avatar, for example. And with that, it's almost like a mask that allows you to be anything that you want to be in that space, right? Things that your pastoral calling and what we see does not allow you to experience, now you can experience in that virtual space. And you know what happens over time? This computer is profiling you over and over again. They ask you to share your memories. So over time, this computer has photos that even you don't know exist. Because someone took a photo of you in a party somewhere, and because of facial recognition software, the computer knows that, last week, Ulisema wewe ni mgonjwa, ulikuwa party Mombasa, and we actually have photos to confirm it. Over and over again. Now, there are cameras on your gadgets, right? Do you know these cameras are live most of the time? Even when you're not using them at Zoom or whatever. Most of the time they're live. So there are all these questions about privacy now. Your phone, and all your phones have cameras, right? And the camera is facing you even now. It's true. I wish I was joking, but this is true. So all this, they are gathering information. There's information gathering, and it said the next most profitable thing in the world will be data. Not even oil, data. You know why? Because if we have data on our president and some of the dirty things he does that he does not want anyone to know, that he knows if it ever got out, mimi kwisha. And Google has that. And privately they release it to the president. And they tell him, you either do this or we do this. What do you think will happen? There was a time during April Fool's Day, Google issued a notice and said they are going to release information on every site everyone who has ever used Google has ever used. You know, there's no such thing as anonymity online, sindio? Footprint, your digital footprint never goes away. Until you deleted. When you think there's a trash bag where you throw those things. You delete it, it's still there. Digital footprints don't disappear, okay? Now, Google said they are going to release information on everything you have ever asked it. Si nyinyi ndio wenda kuuliza Google things, then it pops those pages. It was April Fool's Day. The world almost collapsed. But no, you cannot. Issues, people complained. Of course, they said it was a joke and it was not done. But I tell you the truth. The era we are moving into is the era where we used to think that the robots controlling humans is a far-off, distant fantasy dream in some sci-fi movie, a science movie. No, it's here with us, brothers and sisters. You've already fed that algorithm long enough. It knows you more than your pastor knows you. It knows the people you stalk quietly, the people you like but you cannot tell them. It sees things, all right? That is where we are moving into. And that requires a response. Okay, I'll stop there in terms of building a case for why we need to talk about these things. And how our theology ought to be robust enough to have a response for these matters. You must have heard of this. It's pretty popular now. It's called VUCA, a description of the times we live in. They say the times we live in are volatile, they are complex, they are uncertain, and they are ambiguous. And therefore, you need certain competencies in order to survive in this particular universe, okay? Things are volatile. You don't know what Trump will do Putin will do tomorrow. And he has threatened, by the way, you heard him, said he has nuclear weapons. He told NATO, he told them, you guys, I know you're stronger than me, but you need to remember that Russia is a nuclear state. We have nuclear weapons. When a leader starts to talk like that, and he gets pushed to a corner, do you know what nuclear weapons could do? They say the current stockpiles of nuclear weapons on planet Earth today could destroy the Earth as we know it 8 times over. It will destroy the entire Earth, kill all life on Earth, humans, flora, and fauna. Once, do it twice, do it thrice, up to 8 times. If all the nuclear weapons that are currently being held by states, being stockpiled, were to be released. Do you see how volatile a world we are living in? You just need a madman. And you remember when we had Trump in power, one time in his Twitter, kelele zake za Twitter, with Kim Jong-un. Kim Jong-un threatened something about his missiles. And Trump said, on my desk I have a button. It is red and it is bigger than yours. And so they began fighting about whose button is bigger. It just takes a bad day. A guy will just come and do something stupid. And let me tell you, it's not like it's not been done in the history of humanity. It's been done. 1945, how did the Second World War end? Americans, the way they like to patronize the rest of the world, Americans themselves are the ones who released an atomic bomb. An atomic bomb does not know a child, a woman, a cat, a dog. it destroys everything. And that is what happened. That's what stopped the war. Japan could not continue because they released not one, but 2 such bombs. And Japanese wakainua mikono. What I'm saying is, now we are talking about the possibility of Third World War with what Putin is doing and the responses of the world and all. My point is, things are volatile, and that makes things pretty complex. You might think you're good, you're rich, maybe you've stockpiled enough money for yourself and for your family, you're economically stable, like they like to say, yeah? And then what happens when the economy collapses? You know, Zimbabwe had millionaires who got reduced to paupers in a span of weeks. Mugabe started to do his things. You have 10 million shillings in the bank, and suddenly you come to your bank tomorrow and you still have the 10 million shillings, but the 10 million cannot buy a loaf of bread. That's what happened in Zimbabwe, right? Inflation hit 10 million percent. It was actually more than 10 million percent. So they had a note for 10 million, they had a note for 50 million, because their money now had no value. So you think you're secure because you have money in the bank. Zimbabwe is not too far away from here. Okay? So all the things we prop around ourselves thinking will now make us secure will not. That's the point. So complexity. And then there are uncertainties. And then there's ambiguity, okay? That is why we need an adequate response, because the times call for that. Okay? So, how have Christians traditionally responded to changes? These kinds of changes with sexuality, for example, with all this definition of truth and all. How have Christians traditionally responded? There's been at least 4 ways we've responded. The first way is assimilation, where we compromise we compromise the truth in order to be relevant to the culture. So, for example, right now people are saying it almost feels like they have names for people who oppose homosexual unions, right? You'll be called bigoted, you'll be called homophobic, and all that. And because we like to get likes online, if you post certain things, you will not get them. Sindio? So what do? We begin to change our message slowly. And we begin to compromise. And you know, this is not distant, this is not in Europe, this is not in America. In Nairobi today, there's actually a church that is led by a pastor who I imagine had theological training for gays and homosexuals, right? There's actually one led by a man, there's another one led by a lady. Bishops, they actually wear the cloak, the collar. It's in this town, right? I think one is called the other sheep or the other flock, something. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what we call compromise, where the pressure of the world is so much that you begin to assimilate to the world. You say, you know, maybe you have a point. Maybe, yeah, it's what you make it, you know. Your truth is not necessarily my truth, you know. All of us could have different truths, and we can just coexist. Let's make love, not war, you know. Love is love, you know, slowly but surely. That is assimilation. A lot of that is happening today. The other one is isolation, where we say, this world is completely going to the dogs, it is messed up, me, I now want to isolate myself. I will not interact with the world, I will just live in my own little Christian ghetto. And you see a lot of that today too. No, anyway, let me not give that joke. But the Essenes, for example, back in the day would do that. Isolate themselves from the world, okay? But you very quickly realize that this method does not also work, kwa sababu the Bible says in Jeremiah 17:9 that the problem is with our hearts, right? Our hearts are the ones that are manufacturing evil every day. So, ukienda kujifungia mahali, but umejifungia with yourself, you are the one who will invent that evil and bring it to that otherwise place that is not populated by evil. So, you can't quite isolate per se. And then accommodation, okay? Which means we accommodate what is wrong. We find ways of coexisting with it. Maybe see no evil, do no evil. You know, najuanga tu jamaa anakuanga evil, but ni sawa tu, like, you don't cross my lane, I don't cross my lane. They know what you believe, you know what they believe, we don't interact. Live and let live, okay? You do you, me I do me. You've heard them say that, sindio? That's essentially what it means. We want to accommodate. But the other one is privatization of the faith. And this is especially what is happening in the corporate world today, where we know you're a Christian. We know some of these things are wrong. Kwa mfano, the company has certain things they expect you to do. You're a Christian, you know these things should not be done. But, you have your Sunday life and you have your Monday life. Now this is your Monday life. So we split our reality. We give your story a Sunday best a new meaning. Eh? There's what you wear on Sunday as you go to church. Na Sunday wewe ni mzee wa kanisa. You know, you do your thing the right way. And then on Monday, when you mse, OT, na unajulikana. Yeah? Kama nini, leo si Sunday. Na umeona, even on Sunday, some of these crazy matatus play gospel music, right? Yeah, they do. On Monday, the things you will see on those screens. ROG Sako. Wewe. I'm actually a pastor at ROG. Church. Okay? So yes, you'll find those matatus. On Monday, they will play this, and on Sunday they will play gospel because we've split our world, right? Sunday ndio siku ya God, alafu hizi 6 days zingine ni za sasa tunakuwa sisi. I was stopped by a cop one time. I was on the wrong. My insurance had just expired the previous day. I don't know how those guys know. Yani, I'd been passing that barabara for years. And hawkers, eh? Oh, you're your cheat code. Yani, I'd been passing that road for years, never been stopped. But on the day it quished, the next morning, karao. And I was very confident. You know, when you roll down the window, you know everything is okay. Namna gani afisa? The guy comes, he's like, insurance, he checks, and expired. I was shocked. And so he asks for a bribe, and I tell him, no, I cannot bribe you. Long story short, I tell him, I'm a pastor, I cannot do that. And he tells me, but mimi ni mzee wa kanisa. I'm serious. He even mentioned the church. And I will not mention it because it can get personal. Especially because, you get what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Mzee wa kanisa. Ndio anapokea bribe on Monday. How is he able to reconcile his Monday life and his Sunday life? Niyo dualism, okay? So they privatize their faith. Faith inawekwa kwa drawer fulani, inatolewangwa on Sunday, inarudishwa, alafu tuna open hii drawer ingine, okay? Anyway, brothers and sisters, that is how we have traditionally responded. And so the challenge for us today is that, I'll skip a few of these slides. Inevitably, the gospel we preach must engage the culture. Inevitably, the gospel must engage the culture. 1 Corinthians 1:22-24. Paul writes and says, for the Jews require a sign, and the Greeks seek wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to the Greeks. But we preach Christ crucified, unto the Jews a stumbling block, and to the Greeks foolishness. But unto them that are called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. Do you see what Paul is saying? Our proclamation of the gospel inevitably must challenge what the Greeks believe, and what the Jews believe, and what all these other different groups of people believe. If our faith does not challenge culture, there is a problem with the way we are proclaiming this faith. So how do we need to engage? And I'll be concluding in a bit with these 3 thoughts. I want to put it to us that to meaningfully engage in all these matters, LGBTQ, blah, blah, blah. Yes. Okay, let me bring it back. 1:22-24. So, we need to think about the messenger, we need to think about the message, and we think about the medium. Okay? 3 M's. So let's talk about each of them, and then we will be through. Okay? And we'll start with the messenger. The messenger is you and me. What do we need in order to meaningfully engage with our culture? To answer all these questions about LGBTQ and what truth is and all that, what do we need? Now, in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 10, Paul talks about how he acted when he was among the Thessalonians, and he describes what his conduct was like. That is a picture of what the messenger needs to be like. And so I'm going to mention 3 things. Number 1, the messenger should be committed to the cause. Let me tell you, my brothers and sisters, the easy places are done. The easy places for evangelism, those ones are pretty much done. The places that are left are the tough ones. It will call you to literally die for Christ. The call to carry your cross is a call to death every single day, because the culture will single you out. You will be branded things. Some will be taken to prison because they've refused to bake a cake for, like, you will be required to literally give your life for this cause. There's only one thing harder than dying for Jesus. That is living for Jesus. Because when you die for Jesus, guess what? You're dead. And absence in the body, presence with the Lord. I mean, that's where we are headed anyway. It just accelerates your getting home. So when you die for Christ, glory to God, umefika home faster. But living for Jesus means you die every day without actually dying. Like your life is on the cross every single day. It will tax you. Lottie Moon, who was a missionary to China, said this. She said, on her deathbed, my only regret in life is that I only had one life. If I had 1,000 lives, I would give them all for China. If I had 1,000 lives, I would give them all to China. That is the kind of commitment it will take, because it will cost your life. Some of you will, on social media and all, you will be branded things. You will be called things. People will slander you. Like, you will lose friends. You will not get the most likes because of the things you say. And yet dopamine, which is a chemical released in the brain, when we get likes, it's actually empirical now. Kipatama likes mingi, there's like a chemical released in the brain that makes you feel good. Okay? No wonder the things you post and have to keep checking every 2 minutes to see whether someone new has liked, and it does something to you. We think technology, my thesis is on technology now, and I need to be careful not to digress, but maybe that's just topic for another day that we should come and talk about. Technology, there are things there that we really need to think about, because even the message we proclaim has changed. It's changed. A lot of pastors, because they are human and they have dopamine and stuff, we also do not, even very conservative, authentic, biblical centered pastors, there are things they will not want to say because they're unpopular and you'll not be liked. And it's a big deal. So technology is reshaping us. We shaped technology at first, but now technology is shaping us. And whatever it's shaping us to become is something very dangerous. So anyway, we will need to be committed, and it will cost us. Number 2, we'll need to be culturally aware. You've heard it said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Okay? You do all your strategizing you want. But if you're not aware of what the culture is, that strategy will be eaten for breakfast before any other meal during the day. You will not even have a fighting chance because culture has eaten strategy. This is how it happens. You must have heard those stories of missionaries back in the day who would come to Africa and they'd do things, yeah? Come to Africa and, for example, there's this story I had in South Sudan. Missionaries would go knock on doors, door to door, right? But every time they knocked on doors, people jumped out with spears and many were killed that way. And, they wondered, what is it? And they never made the connection between knocking on doors and that response. Because when they meet the people out there, people are okay. But when you go knocking on doors, kumbe in that culture, that is how thieves would announce themselves. Ama kama umekosana na mtu, niki-announce na kuja na ubaya, I come knocking on doors. So you, without studying culture, you are going to knock doors because where you come from, doors are knocked. You will get mauled, you'll get eaten before you even get a chance to preach that gospel, right? You've heard the story of here in Pokot, yes is a clique. When someone tells you yes, they click. So some people, you're talking to people and guys are clicking a lot. And some people are really taking offense, wondering, Maze, what's wrong with these people? They must be really angry. But the people who are really agreeing with what you're saying. Or in India, how no is, you shake your head like this, up, down, that is no. Right, left, there's a way they do it. Right, left is yes, or being in agreement. So my friend went to India and he was looking for a church. And he kept asking people, and everyone was shaking their head from left to right. Do you know a church? Because that's how they pronounce it. And everyone would go, and so he'd move on quickly to the next person. And move on, until he realized something is wrong. Kwani all these people, and they told, but when we say like that, we mean yes, we know. You know, we are waiting for further, like which kind of church to tell you where the church is. My point is, we need to study our culture. We need to be aware of how to engage this culture, so that we preach in a manner and in the place where the people actually are at. This is one of the big problems with our churches. And especially, these mainline churches like yours, the Presbyterian church is known, and I love them for, being very solid and structured and all, and, mutaratara and everything. The unfortunate bit of that is that it implies that you probably take a lot longer, it take a lot more time to change. So that if there are certain things that need to be changed, you take a while to adapt. And that is a problem that you need to think about, okay? Next, you will need to be consistent. My time, okay, wow. You need to be consistent as a messenger. With everything being fluid and subjective, authenticity and consistency are probably the most valuable thing this culture demands right now. Authenticity. Because guess what? What we see is not what we get often. What we see is not the real deal. You've heard those stories, yeah? Of Jacob going to bed with Leah and waking up with, going to bed with Rachel and waking up with Leah, right? You've heard those stories. Like, things are so fake and inauthentic that you don't know what is true and what is not. In times like this, consistency and authenticity become extremely important. So as a messenger, how authentic are you? Is your inner man and outer man one? Are you consistent? Are you one? Okay? That you will need if you're going to be effective in this culture. So, number one, I say the messenger. Number two, I say the message. Okay? And I'll move faster here. A few more minutes and I'll be out of here. The message needs to have these three C's. Number one, our message needs to be Christ-centered. And my brothers, a voice from heaven was heard 3 times when Jesus was on planet Earth. And every single one of those times, God was talking about his son, Jesus. Yani every time God opened his mouth to speak in the New Testament, it was about Jesus. And then you, as a preacher of the gospel of Christ, every time you open your mouth, you mention everything else apart from Jesus. You motivate people, you entertain people, you have lots of humor, people laugh a lot, and they love you for that. You're charismatic and ebullient and, jolly good fella. But not talk about Jesus, that is not the gospel. Okay? Our gospel must be Christ-centered. Because guess what? Christ is right at the center of what God is doing around the world. God's redemptive purposes are centered around the person of Jesus. So you must preach Jesus. And then you must be clear. Okay? And clarity basically asks, is what is said what is heard? Is what I'm saying what you're hearing? You might be saying one thing and people are hearing the other. Sindio? I wanted to make cite a political example, but we are all very sensitive with politics now, so let me stay clear. But is what you're saying what is being heard? A lot of time, people hear beyond what is being said. So, what forms are we using? What forms of communication are we using? Yeah, to enable that clarity. Okay? And then contextualization. Our message needs to be contextualized. Our message needs to be relevant to the ground where we are preaching. Should be done in 5 minutes now. And some have argued that this whole push for relevance has caused us to be irreverent. Okay? So how do we pursue relevance while maintaining reverence to God? And so they've had a problem with that. But I want to argue that no, the Bible actually pushes for contextualization. Like the sons of Issachar who understood their times and knew what to do. Like Jesus, he speaks to Nicodemus, an old man, he tells him, you must be born again. To Peter, who is a fisherman, he tells him, I will make you a fisher of men. To Mary and Martha, who are grieving a death, he tells them, I am the resurrection and the life. To the thirsty Samaritan woman, and tells her, I'll give you water that ukikunywa, you'll never thirst again. Do you see what Jesus was doing? Knows the situation where this person is at and gets into that situation, and the message he preaches is contextualized and connects with where that person is at. And I could go on and on about the others, but in the interest of time, I'll move on. So, lastly, the mediums. The mediums matter. Remember, 3 M's. Number 1 was the messenger. Number 2 was the message. And lastly, the mediums that we use also matter. Okay? Now, here are some examples of mediums that were used. Jesus, what medium did Jesus use to teach? It said 75% of the lessons Jesus taught, he taught through stories, parables, okay? And then Paul used the mediums available to him, which were letters, okay? And travels, roads, Roman roads. Caesar Augustus had built a serious infrastructure of roads across the Roman Empire. It used, you've heard that saying, all roads lead to Rome. That's where the statement originated from. Because when the Romans would go and conquer a place, they would conscript the men there to forced labor, and you'd begin to build a road from that town back to Rome. So all roads led to Rome. So there are lots of roads. Paul took advantage of that and rode on those roads to preach the gospel. What are some of those roads that God has availed for us today? Could Facebook be one of those roads? Absolutely. Look at how many people are there. Could Twitter be one of those roads? Could Instagram be one of those? If Paul was here today, do you think he'd be on Twitter? What do you think he'd be saying on Twitter?
Sending memes.
Sorry?
Sending memes.
Sending memes. The guy would be preaching the gospel or WhatsApp. Status and stories. Instead of posting the latest dance challenge, shaking your behinds. Could we be posting things that help people see Christ for who he is? And just helping amplify our message. So what are those roads and how are we using them? The reformers and the printing press and our generation and technology. So the mediums matter. And then for us to ensure that we maximize the media, we need to ensure that the mediums are current. Okay? So for example, people right now are moving away from, nimeambiwa Facebook ni ya wazee. So ukitaka ku reach this generation, the guys are on TikTok. So who is your audience? Kama ni wale ma youth, wale ma teenagers and stuff, maybe you need a TikTok account. Okay? And begin to influence that space the right way. So Paul went to where the people are. He went to the Agora in Athens, in Greece. What are some of those modern day agoras? Okay? And then we need to be contextually relevant, exegete our context. I mean, let's describe our context best. Try to figure out who your persona is. Whom do you reach out to? Thindigwa, Pcea. Ni nani? What does the person you're reaching out to look like? What does he... Okay. Where does he go to school most probably? And you would know this from the general statistics of the area where you're staying. Sindio? That's why you don't see advertisements of fancy cars in Kibera. Izo magari nini. Utazipata? Runda, Kileleshwa. Those are the places where those adverts would be. Because they know who they are reaching out to. So who is your audience? Okay? That is important. Exegete that context so that your presentation then is connected to that and it's relevant. All right? You don't go do a crusade inside Runda. And I know there's Pcea Evergreen inside Runda. Ukiweka hapo crusade, who will come? Exactly, but are there ways that you can reach the community there? Yes. So exegete that context. Understand what ways would work there. If it means you commission a study, do it. Be dutiful. Invest in understanding where your people are so that you can engage. And then lastly, you will need to be cost effective. And in conclusion, I just want you to see where people are. These are 2021 statistics of the most used social media platforms in Kenya. 96.5% of all internet users aged between 16 to 64 in Kenya are on WhatsApp. So the most popular app now in Kenya, WhatsApp. Followed by YouTube at 91.3%, then Facebook, then Instagram. So that's just instructive. Kind of helps you see where the people are at. It might have changed. This were 2021 stats. 54.38% million people in total in Kenya as at 2021. 28.2% are in the urban centers. So what does your audience look like? You know, as you think about the national strategy for Pcea, where are the majority of Kenyans? 72% are where? In the rural areas. Sindio? So, Bwana Director, kazi kwako. As we craft our strategies, let's not just get lost in the city here and forget where some of these real needs are, okay? In the rural areas, for instance. So anyway, you may want to study that for yourself. And as we go, Matthew 28:18-20, God promises that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to him. Therefore, we should go to all the nations. And nations are ethno-linguistic groups where people are. So go to the Facebook nation, go to the Twitter nation, go to the high scholars nation, go to all nations. And do what? Preach all the gospel. Usifinye finye na kuongeza chumvi na just preach the gospel. Okay? Even if it offends, even if it preach the gospel. That's what Paul said to Timothy. One of the last things he said to him, right? And then lastly, he promises that as you do that, his presence will be with you all the time. Amen? Brothers and sisters, I will stop there. God bless you and thank you for your time.
Greetings from CAC TV, our own church TV station that was launched